Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to Episode 8 of Strokecast. Episode 8 is always an exciting episode for a new podcast because most new podcasts never make it past Episode 7. So I am thrilled to have survived the first major marker of pod fade. Today, we're going to talk about the Valsalva maneuver and the circulatory system. Occupational and physical therapy were hard work for me as a patient, and I'm sure for my therapists as well. During my inpatient days, I would be laying on a mat table in the PT gym while my therapist would try to get me to raise or hold my arm up or lift my leg. And this was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Imagine using all of your effort to push a large cement mixer. I mean, that's what my brain was trying to do with my limbs. The decision-making part of my brain was screaming at the physical interface to my limbs, but the cells in that physical interface were gone. All my brain could do was scream harder at my now half-dead basal ganglia. Of course, other cells and other neurons would try to relay that message to the limbs, and they did their best, but not enough of them had rewired yet. I was still in the early stages of my neuroplastic brain repair. But I still made the effort, even in some ways that I probably shouldn't have. So while that was going on in my head, other things were going on further down in my body. As I tried to do these exercises, I would, tense my core muscles and hold my breath in, essentially trying to use my full lungs as a point of leverage that the rest of my body could exert energy against to do the hard work of lifting my leg or, whatever. Basically, I was bearing down in my exercise like folks with constipation might do, or like weightlifters do when they lift those ridiculously heavy weights during competition. It was hold breath, tense muscles, exert effort. This is called the Valsalva maneuver. It involves trying to force air out of your lungs while preventing that air from leaving. It's also a common way of dealing with changes in air pressure. So, for example, if you've ever pinched your nose and tried to exhale to relieve ear pressure while you're on an airplane that's landing, you are using the Valsalva maneuver to try to pop your ears. And a lot of people do this sort of thing when they're trying to exert a lot of physical energy or lift something that's really heavy. They'll hold their breath while they tense and try to pivot around all of that. Now, of course, when other folks see me doing this, the most striking thing is how red my face gets from the strain. I do have that near translucent skin common to those of us with Irish or Northern European ancestry, and that strain is visible, and I'm told it's pretty scary looking. I'm sure it looked like I was about to have another stroke. This led to the most common instruction a therapist would give me that month I lived in the hospital. Breathe. I never really understood why. I knew the muscles needed oxygen to work, and more importantly, my brain needs oxygen to keep nerves alive. Lack of oxygen-rich blood is how I got into this situation in the first place, and why right then I was laying on that therapy mat table engaging in that ill-advised Valsalva maneuver. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Eventually, I learned more of the details. See, when I got to the ER on June 3rd, one of the myriad of tests that they did was to give me an ultrasound to look at the flow of blood through my heart. After the initial scan, the tech then injected air bubbles into my IV to monitor the flow of the bubbles through my system. Of course, this meant I started talking about all the spy and crime dramas where the bad guy kills the witness or the good guy by doing this exact same thing, adding bubbles to the IV to cause a pulmonary embolism and death. The tech explained that they never use enough air on those shows to actually kill someone. And she seemed sort of disappointed in the skill of those killers. I decided to go ahead and store that information away for future use. But this is how they found my PFO. PFO means patent foramen ovale. It's a hole in the heart between the right and left sides, and roughly 30% of adults have this heart defect, this hole in their hearts. But why does this matter? Let's take a look at how blood flows through the circulatory system and DVT, or deep vein thrombosis. Now, DVT is something I was already familiar with because in my previous life I was a frequent flyer, and it's something you hear about a lot in the context of air travel. In-flight magazines, those free magazines you find in the airplane, often caution against DVT. It's usually in the back several pages where they have their route map and the list of the different beverages that they have on board, and that list of movies that are always on a flight that you don't happen to be on. But what these articles do is they caution passengers to do ankle exercises and move their feet around while sitting in their coach seats to improve blood flow. It addresses the concern that sitting too still for too long in an airplane seat can cause clots to form in the lower leg, and then those clots can break free and wreak havoc elsewhere in the body. Other guidance for travelers is to simply get up and walk around on long flights, or to wear compression socks on the flights. It's also basically the reason that I had to wear leg squeezy things in the hospital at night. And yes, I'm pretty sure leg squeezy thing is the technical term. These were basically airbags that would squeeze and release my calves throughout the night to try and keep blood flowing. You see, the feet and the calves are the parts of the body that are furthest away from the heart. Now you combine that distance with the nature of gravity, and it's more likely that blood clots will form there. Now, the heart isn't the only organ that circulates blood. The muscles in our limbs also play a role in that by squeezing and releasing the blood vessels just through their normal course of movement throughout the day, as we walk around or as we raise and lower our arms and use our hands. Of course, after a stroke, when I no longer use that leg significantly during the day, circulation becomes problematic. Many stroke survivors experience swelling in their affected limbs for this reason. That's commonly referred to as edema. Lack of muscle activity leads to less circulation of blood, lymph, and other liquidy goodness. Of course, when circulation is impaired, clots are more likely to form, and they're more likely to be bigger clots. So now we're talking about part of the body that's already susceptible to clots, the calves and the feet, and now in a condition where they're doing less work, which makes clots even more likely, and so there's lots of things that can go wrong here. Of course, clots do form there all the time, and usually it's not a problem because the lungs filter them out and break them down. See, the lungs actually do a lot more things than just complain when I try to run. This was actually news to me. I never knew that the lungs were actually responsible for breaking down blood clots and helping to clean that stuff out of the blood before it goes back to the rest of the body. Remember, I said before, the heart has two halves, a left half and a right half. The way blood routes through the body is that after it gives up its oxygen and nutrients to cells in the body and picks up carbon dioxide, CO2, that we exhale, it heads into the veins, and the veins take it to the right side of the heart. The heart then pumps and sends that blood from its right side to the lungs. In the lungs, the blood picks up oxygen, gives up its CO2, gets its clots filtered out, and then flows to the left side of the heart, which then pumps it out through the aorta to feed the rest of the body and, of course, the brain. Now, I mentioned that PFO that I have. See, everybody has a PFO in utero, meaning that when we're still gestating, before we're born, we have a PFO. And that's because we don't breathe air at that point in our development. There isn't any air in the womb. What the PFO does is it allows blood to skip the developing lungs and go directly from the right side of the heart to the left side and then to the rest of the tiny body. 70% of the time, that PFO closes on its own shortly after birth. 30% of the time, it doesn't. So nearly 1/3 of the adults that are out there today have a PFO. They have that hole in their heart. So let's start bringing all this together. In an adult with a PFO, some blood still bypasses the oxygenating, clot-busting lungs and goes straight from the right side to the left side. And this is what that ultrasound tech was looking for when she injected air into my IV. She wanted to follow the bubbles as some blood took that shortcut to the rest of my system. The larger the PFO, the more blood and the larger the clots that can pass through and potentially lodge in the brain. Because again, anything passing through that PFO is skipping the filtering function of the lungs. A large PFO can therefore cause strokes. In my case, later testing revealed that my PFO was rather small and unlikely to contribute to my stroke, so there was no need to surgically close it. But when you engage the Valsalva maneuver, you are also altering your heart rate and blood pressure and the way blood flows through your torso. It's kind of like pulling back on a slingshot. So when you engage Valsalva, you're pulling that slingshot back. You're putting a lot more tension into that system. And when I go ahead and relax and release that Valsalva maneuver, I'm also releasing that slingshot, and a surge of blood rushes into the right side of my heart. That sudden rush means that more blood and clots will take that PFO shortcut to the brain without getting oxygen first. And as we all know, clots in the brain are a bad thing. So the lesson is to breathe while doing exercises, therapy, or anything else. Whether that's simply remembering to breathe, whether that's going through a meditation process, whether it's a yoga thing or whatever, it's amazing how important it is to just breathe while doing other things. The extra oxygen will help with the performance, and skipping the Valsalva will put less strain on the heart and send less stuff through the PFO. Now, when working hard, by all means, engage your core muscles. Tense them, use them, build them up. But like everybody's favorite karaoke band, Journey, don't stop breathing. And that brings us to our hack of the week, Mise en place. Cooks or just fans of cooking shows and Food Network TV probably already know the term mise en place. Basically, it means everything in its place. When preparing a meal, it refers to getting all of your ingredients ready to go and getting your equipment in place before you start cooking. The alternative, of course, is to pull stuff together as you need it. Start cooking, go to the fridge for something else, pull something else down, cut something else up. Now, this makes the timing of everything a challenge, and it can be stressful. I found that approach to be tough when I had 2 functional hands and nearly impossible with 1. Whether disabled or not, everyone can benefit from mise en place. So let's see how this plays out when I make an omelet. If I'm relying on my mise en place, I'll start by putting a mixing bowl on the counter, then putting a frying pan on the stove with the stove turned off. I'll also grab a piece of Dicem, a spatula, a pat of butter, and whatever else I need. Then I'll pull 1 egg out of the fridge. Then I'll pull out the carton of egg whites because I'm going to pretend to be healthful here. Then I'll pull out a couple of slices of cheese because I'm not actually going to be healthful. And then I'll pull out some scallions or some other green stuff. And I'll put all of this on the counter. Then I'll start tearing up those 2 slices of Kraft singles into little pieces, cut up the scallions, and I'll mix the egg and egg whites in the mixing bowl, which is sitting on a piece of Dicem so that bowl doesn't spill. Only when all of those ingredients are fully prepped and ready do I then turn on the stove. And from that point, it's just a question of putting the ingredients in. and everything is already within reach and all ready to go. So I may actually have some downtime in between steps as I wait for butter to melt or for eggs to solidify. But that's okay, because I have this system in place, so I'm not stressed out. I'm not trying to make time. I'm not rushing through things, which is always a bad idea when you're working with one hand. And in my short 10-month experience here, as I continue to live with disabilities, Mise en Place is a great way to minimize their impact. Whether it's doing laundry, filling a bi-weekly pill box, or making breakfast, Mise en Place makes the difference. So that's it for this week. Next time you do your exercises, and every time you do your exercises, remember to breathe. Get all your ingredients together before you start your next project, whatever that may be, so you have your Mise en Place in place. Do you enjoy Strokecast? Go ahead and share this episode with a friend or colleague, or a relative. And of course, as always, don't get best. Get better. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you next week.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.